Good morning. Things got very quiet. I promise I am not that formal. So I'll talk about that in a minute, but welcome to the National Transportation Safety Board. I'm Jennifer Homendy, and I am honored to serve as chair of the NTSB. With me today are several of my colleagues in the Office of Aviation Safety. To my right is Tim LeBaron, the director of our Office of Aviation Safety. He'll be switching in and out with Bryce Banning, who serves as a senior aviation accident investigator in our Air Carrier and Space Investigations Division. To my left is Betty Koshing, a transportation safety specialist with the NTSB and a former air traffic controller. We also have on the panel Warren Abrams, somewhere here, yep. One of our aviation accident investigators who is focused on operational factors, Jason Fedek, who is somewhere here, I thought. Okay, oh, now it's Emily. Okay, so we will just wing it there. And Sean Williams, a senior aviation accident investigator out of our central region. Many others within the NTSB contributed to this event, and I want to thank them for their hard work and dedication. I am positive that today will be a success as we focus on a path forward together. Now, if you're new to the NTSB or watching this event later on our YouTube channel, here's what we do. We're a small but mighty agency of 415 people and growing. USA Jobs is the place to go for our open vacancies, but we have highly skilled professionals that are dedicated to transportation safety. We investigate accidents in all modes of transportation, and at the completion of those accident investigations, we issue safety recommendations that are aimed at preventing that tragedy from reoccurring. Our mission, though, goes beyond just investigating when something goes wrong. To make our skies safer, the NTSB must be proactive. That's why we're here today and why I'm excited to see all of you today. Since 2017, the number of runway incursions has fluctuated from a high of 2,416 to a low of 1,144 in 2020, a year that saw historic lows in demand for passenger air travel. But they've ticked up since, over 1,600 in 2021, and in 2022, I expect that we'll have some updated numbers today from FAA, and I look forward to their presentation. Now, the most dangerous incursions, the closest calls, are on the rise. We pulled figures yesterday from the FAA, which showed that Category A and B events, those are the incidents with a significant potential for collision or in which a collision was narrowly avoided, that those are on the rise, although I understand, and again, we pulled those yesterday, I understand that today the FAA will show a decrease, and so I'll likely want to ask a question on why our data, when our professionals pulled data yesterday, is different than it is today. This year alone, there have been a total of 365 runway incursions, 6 of which the NTSB is investigating. One of these 6 is a Category A event that occurred in Austin this past February. How close was this close call? Within 115 feet, with 131 souls on board the 2 aircraft. As stated in our preliminary report, 2 crew members were on the flight deck of the FedEx plane, 2 crew members who I believe prevented a disaster from occurring in Austin that day. At an altitude of about 150 feet, and this is all in our preliminary report, the first officer called a go-around when he saw the silhouette of a Southwest plane in low visibility conditions, and soon after called on the Southwest crew to abort their takeoff. Those 2 crew members are heroes in my book. In fact, I'm reaching out to see them in person sometime this summer. We're also investigating 2 wrong runway landings that happened last June. One was a cargo plane in Tulsa with 2 crew members on board. The other was a passenger flight in Pittsburgh where 174 people were at risk. While we won't be discussing our open investigations today, these events should serve as a wake-up call. The sobering truth is that it only takes one. Any of these events could have had devastating consequences, could have led to tragedy, to more bereaved families. The NTSB has a number of open safety recommendations focused on preventing runway incursions. One of those is 23 years old. It superseded a recommendation issued 10 years before that, and that superseded another recommendation. That recommendation is to FAA, which requires at all airports with scheduled passenger service a ground movement safety system that will prevent runway incursions. It is open acceptable, as the FAA has made progress. We also have recommendations for technology to alert pilots when an airplane isn't aligned with a runway surface, upgrading and installing surveillance detection systems at additional airports, and conducting human factors research to determine how to make a closed runway more conspicuous to pilots. Now, this is not the first time we've convened an event on runway incursions. The last time we did so was in 2017. But we're not here to repeat the past. Today, we're focusing on a path forward together. Oh, Dewan, I'm sorry I didn't introduce you. Dewan Civilian, who is also with the NTSB. See, I should have come down here earlier. I did not mean to ignore some of our colleagues. I am pleased today that we have more voices on the table, at the table, compared to 2017. More voices make us safer. No one person or group can have all the answers. Many of these new voices are from labor. We can't expect to make our skies safer without the input of frontline workers. One union president recently told me his members who drive on airport surfaces are desperate for better training. Training is certainly an issue across the entire industry. So is staffing. Low staffing levels can have a significant impact on safety. I believe the FAA is looking to hire about 3,000 air traffic controllers in the coming years. Funding is an issue. I don't work for the FAA, but I will advocate for more funding for the FAA. Of course, everybody in the NTSB right now is saying, we need it too, don't worry, I'm doing that too. But if we want to upgrade existing technologies to prevent runway incursions, implement new technologies, invest in projects to reconfigure or construct new taxiways, install new lighting, modernize systems so that we are better able to use data in decision-making, and build upon an already highly skilled workforce, that takes resources. That's an investment in safety and in service, an investment I believe the traveling public wants and expects of our federal government. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I'm relentless when it comes to safety, and I can't apologize to that because we see people on the worst days of their lives. But here's the thing, so is everyone else at this table. Everyone else at this table is committed to safety. Frankly, in this audience as well. All of us are partners in safety. The only reason you all aren't up here is because I didn't have room, and we might never get through the agenda. But not a single one of us up here ever wants to see a tragedy. No one. We all may have different views on the path forward and how to prevent tragedy, but there's no doubt in my mind that we are all committed to safety, including FAA, us. FAA is our strong safety partners, and everybody in the industry, whether it's labor or research institutes with universities and industry management itself. So today is about getting down to brass tacks. I don't want to just talk for 4 hours. I want to dig into the areas where we clearly need action. I want to ask ourselves the tough questions on why we haven't made more progress, and most importantly, discuss and then commit to real solutions to preventing disaster. I want us not just to talk at each other, but to talk with each other to figure out how together we improve safety, and I want some real things to come out of this. I think we can do that together, because we need action and we need it now. We don't want to be on another scene of a tragedy. Neither does FAA, neither does any of you. So we have an opportunity to get past things like needing to be more vigilant and really talk about where we go in the future. This is a real challenging time in aviation. I don't have to tell any of you, we're coming out of the pandemic. We have folks that have retired, even NTSB faces that. We have 30% of our workforce is retirement eligible. We're filling vacancies just like FAA is. We want to attract people to great jobs. We have training that needs to be accomplished by the industry and the FAA, and we also have workers who need to make sure that they're adequately trained, that they're protected on the job, all while we have one of the most congested airspace in the world. You know, we've got drones, we've got AAM, we've got more commercial space launches and reentries. And so how we maintain our gold standard of safety, and we are the gold standard when it comes to aviation safety, thanks to everyone here at this table, amid all those challenges by preventing runway incursion, that is today's mandate. So I'm very excited. We have a great agenda to guide us. We have an excellent, I can predict, presentation by our safety partners at the FAA on the scope of runway incursions. Then we'll go into procedures and training, and discussion on procedures and training. We'll have a short break. I had hoped to have donuts and coffee. I did not get up that early. I did, but I ran. I did have 4 shots of espresso, so it is going to be an interesting morning. 10:30 to 11:45, we're going to talk about emerging technologies, and we'll go into other challenges and next steps. I think at the end of this, I'd like to, maybe send what came out of this to the secretary, the acting FAA administrator, and maybe to the House and Senate, so they're aware of some things we did together in our discussions. I think it's a good path forward, and I really appreciate all of you being here. And for FAA, for others, don't think I'm leaving you out, but for FAA and for NTSB, I do have pizza up in my office that I personally bought. So let me clarify that. So please come up and share some time together so we can get to know each other a little bit more. Also, just so you're aware, when we do get to questions, I am not that formal. If you have something that you want to interject with, you think we should go in a different direction, something's missing, you want to make a comment, raise your hand, interrupt, just start speaking, whatever you want to do. Don't worry about it. I just want the best discussion to come out of this. So don't hold back if you want to ask something, or if you of your fellow colleagues, or you want to add something, please feel free to do so. Also, it will get hot with the lights. I plan on not wearing my jacket the whole time. You should feel free to take yours off as well. We are going to start with Brian and go around the table to talk about, the 1 or 2 recommendations you want to give for on runway safety.
It's always good to be the first one here. So, Brian Willis, Director of Safety for UND. I get asked questions all the time. If you could change one thing, what would it be? I'm going to just, as a pilot, aeronautical decision making. How we teach, train. Is really important, and from a runway incursion standpoint, when it comes down to communication, I do think communicating current effective processes and for procedures for, I'll say, the pilot group that I'm dealing with, which is the 18 to 23-year-olds, before they head off to the regional airlines, is building that experience early. The attention to small detail, clear left, clear right, the stuff that I'm teaching my 14-year-old daughter how to do when she's driving a car right now. Is really laying that foundation early. And again, that's something that we're challenged with at the university level, but I think it's paramount to their success 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, from an industry standpoint. And then From a long term, I'm going to cheat here and just technology is, I think is paramount. It sounds like there's a lot of technology on the horizon, but I do think that when you look at our operations at the smaller airfields that aren't ever going to be probably considered the top 50s, right, that are going to get a lot of these technologies, finding technologies that when we talk about a safety net, it covers from the east to the west. And it doesn't discriminate if you're a Bravo, a Charlie, a Delta, an Echo, or a Golf. It's a system that can be used almost anywhere.
I think the one thing I'd say is we probably need to have more of these types of sessions, or at least understand that the universities are could be used as test beds, as proving grounds. We would love to collaborate with the FAA, NTSB, whoever is out there on research for future technology and things like that. Or it could also be used as an opportunity to gather some data of the less experienced pilots and what are we seeing here to make sure that some of those skill sets are addressed at this point early in their careers before they get to the regionals or get to the majors. So more events if we could have, I would say definitely communication, as Brian has mentioned, is very key.
So, Nobile Ranch, RAA, Regional Airline Association. I think one thing we can do like today, right now, is emphasis on professionalism. And all of us here are safety leaders, that's why we're here. But we talked about we are experiencing least experienced workforce. So we can definitely emphasize on our daily operations, training, or no matter what our job is, we can definitely bring to our daily work. And another thing, it is true, we are operating in from commercial aviation industry point of view, we are operating in the safest period. And so, every airlines, we investigate all incidents and accidents and conduct route analysis and capture lessons learned. But the truth is there are not many really incidents and accidents that we can learn from. So that pushes us to shift our way to look at the safety from the traditional way, which focuses on what went wrong and how we can avoid it, to what are we doing right so we can continue to do right. And I think that's kind of mentality shift we are kind of experiencing as industry. And how we're gonna do that, I would leave a collaborative partnership and a solution-oriented approach to the problems or issues we have. And working together will get us where we want it to go.
Hey, Jennifer, once again, thanks. By the way, we'll buy donuts and coffee next year. APA will, if you invite us back. Just saying. Two recommendations. At this critical time in the industry, when I feel, and I think most of us feel, the system's under stress, it's incredibly important, in my opinion, that we don't reduce training, we increase training, especially in light of the churn that's taken place and the low experience levels in the cockpit. And I would also say that the operational experience levels that have proven to be so critical in reducing our critical incidents be maintained. And the second piece goes back to something that I think is important to look forward. And Kim has mentioned this, so I'm not going to reiterate it too much, but the foundation of the data you guys need to get to those answers, and Naguya spoke to it also, is a foundation of trust. And it's trust between pilots, the FAA, pilots in the NTSB, and some of the incidents that have happened recently, I think, might have eroded that trust. We need to work on it. When pilots feel free to report not just incidents that are going to result in possible revocation of licenses, but what could have, would have, and should have happened, then you guys will be able to look forward, and you guys will be able to predict and be more proactive than reactive.
Once again, I want to thank on behalf of Mike Clem, on behalf of the International Association of Machinists, I want to thank you for the invitation. a lot of the two things I wanted to bring up have been talked about quite a bit today, and that is obviously the training and the communication. The training, I think a lot of people would be surprised how little importance is put on training. Safety is a passion. A lot of people in this room I thought I had it until I walked into this room. This room's been incredibly passionate about safety, which is eye-opening to me. But for those of you that don't know, a lot of the carriers, and I'm not looking to throw the carriers under the bus, but training takes place on downtime. It used to be taken out of the operation and focused solely on what your training needed to be, on the training that needed to be done, and that's not the case now. Now what carriers ask you to do in order to save money, we talked about economics, is do your training in between flights, and the airline industry is busier now than it's ever been. I'm not so sure that that's adequate training. I would believe that the incursions that take place with the people I represent are hopefully more on the C and D level, but that doesn't make them any less important. And obviously, again, back to communication. I think communication between ground traffic controller and the people on the ground is of the utmost importance.
John Dermody, FAA Director of Airport Safety and Standards. Thanks again for the invite. This is a very productive conversation. For two things that I think would move the ball in our area would be really focusing on how we can continue to improve geometry on airports. And our standards and airport design have come a long way. We've had a lot more data to change those standards over time, to really focus on safety and focus on human factors, and that's a huge area that we're continuing to do research on how human factors affect how a pilot looks at an intersection of a runway taxiway. So I think that's a huge piece. It's incremental, but it is something where, with limited funding that we do have, this is something we can focus on and continue to make improvements. The second one would be to expand our technologies and our visual aids. So I was pleased by the results from the Runway Safety Council, the surface safety team, when they looked at runway guard lights. The results really showed that they do make a difference. They are effective, and they aren't installed at every intersection. So maybe we do need to take a look at, how do we prioritize that and prioritize it on a risk level throughout the country, and figure out how we can expand the use of runway guard lights where it makes sense. And in addition, it would be, the runway incursion warning systems. Make sure that people know they are AIP eligible, they are available, and they should be purchased. The FAA is fully supporting these financially. We're supporting them as part of our mission. And the same holds true for the NTSB out squitters for vehicles. Same exact thing. Each of these are tools in our toolbox that we should continue to expand. Thank you.
Great. Alex Kurtzen, Director of Airports at the National Business Aviation Association. This is not one of my two, but I just wanted to add, I didn't get a chance to chime in on the previous technology discussion. Something we didn't talk about is remote towers. I know that's a big topic here in Leesburg, Virginia, and that's something I think that we should look at closely, and it can be another solution that can be more embraced. In terms of items to prevent runway incursions, I think further enhancing information sharing, I know we've talked about it quite a bit, will go a long way. As pilots, we're trained to give PIREPs on icing, on turbulence, on braking action. If we can provide more feedback on intersection potential locations for runway incursions, as well as feedback on what is working well, I think that will help, as well as data gathering. Our avionics are becoming more advanced to be able to gain information from the cockpit. I know we're talking about increasing CVR recording times where we can further analyze and glean from what's happening on the flight deck and be able to help other pilots that are put in similar situations. And the second one is better education and more situational-based training for surface operations. I think at all levels, both private pilots as well as professional pilots, we can benefit from that at airports that we operate at. Thank you again for the invite and for hosting us.
Jason Nemagowski, FAA Air Traffic Human Performance. Two thoughts I had. One I kind of gave away earlier, I guess, was about for safety to take place, situational awareness, we've got to have overlapping models of what we're doing. Drivers, pilots, controllers have different missions, but the same overall goal. and understanding what each party is doing and where those overlaps are and what they do would be beneficial. And I think the idea of creating some training which works for all three parties, sharing that what each party does at the same different times in the same event would help people to know what they need to share with their other side, because it's communication. And if I know that the controller actually can't see this, then the pilot might share with them. If as a controller, I realize that the pilot doesn't know something I know, then I may tell them. And by breaking that down and getting the same mental model, I think would help in the more immediate term. And that's about challenge communication. And the other one I had was just helping everyone to be the best they can be in the non-technical skills. So it's about helping people to arrive for work in the best state, teaching them the conversations to have. Bridget mentioned earlier, it takes confidence to speak up and say to someone, is this right? Should I be doing that? And we need that skill in people. We need to train that into people because not everybody has that naturally. So helping people to be the best they can be.
This is Dewan Civilian from NTSB Human Performance. So 2 recommendations that I would have in terms of preventing runway incursions is, we talked a lot about technology today. And I just want to reiterate that there's a constant need to effectively integrate the human with the system. So whether that be in the tower or the pilot interface on the flight deck, in terms of being able to see if there's aircraft on the runway or taxiway, that's all important. The other thing I'd like to talk about is system safety. When we look at systems, we talked about how systems can fail. It's important that when we test systems that we look at those risks and those associated hazards that could come about as a result of this new technology. So I think I just want to reiterate those 2 points in this discussion. Thank you.
My name is Nathan Hoyt, NTSB, and I would say my recommendation would be to find a solution for not only identifying technology for preventing runway incursions, but then also finding a way to speed up the process for getting that technology tested, certified, and implemented within a reasonable time frame. And then I'd also second the shared mental model among controllers, pilots, and ground ops.
Okay, Max Tidwell with A4A. In June, or not June, March 9th, the CEOs of all the carriers, the board of directors for A4A got together and asked the question, what more can we do as an organization to increase safety? So I highly value all the input that I've heard today, and I look forward to further discussions on how I can bring this information back through A4A to the CEOs of the company on what's on our mind when it comes to safety. Some specific takeaways with runway safety. Essentially, I have 3 councils that I work with. The first one being the Ops Council. I want to make sure that we are deep diving the training. I've heard the training, reducing training to get people through, making sure our standards. I want to make sure from the flight ops side that we are seriously looking at the training and creating scenarios that are realistic for today's operating environment. We've all talked about increased risk. We've talked about reduced experience in the operation. What are those things that could jump up on a new crew member or a recurrent qual or a 30-year captain? What are these new things that we're going to be challenged with? And also on the technical side, the technology implementation, what is the low-hanging fruit? And do we have the data to show the results of that technology? When we talk about the Honeywell RAS system, I want to look at that data and provide a little bit more background for the CEOs to really consider what more could we do in that technology realm that's already in the airplanes. On the ATC piece, we are attending the June 6th Tech Summit. Our air traffic team is really engaged with that. We want to push what's next, not only what's next year, but what's next generation, what's 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, but what can we implement right now that's going to help us reduce the risk of runway incursions? Really pushing the envelope on that. And then with the Safety Council, of course, it's a much bigger umbrella. And how do we, I've heard training a number of times. How do we make that training impactful, making it personal to an individual. So it's more than just sitting down in your off time between turns, clicking through a PowerPoint. How do we partner with AAAE? How do we partner with our airports around the country to make our technicians' training for taxi, run-up, meaningful in the operation? I think that's a nugget that I can run with. So there's a lot of things in my mind when it comes to training to make sure it's actually having the intended impact, the outcome that we want. And I look forward to seeing the continued emphasis on not only runway safety, but safety in the operation over the next several years as we work together as a team to make things better. So appreciate the invite, and I've talked way too long.
Brad Miller with Honeywell, and thank you again for the invite. It's been really enlightening and really appreciate the information sharing. I almost feel like a fish out of water because I'm more on the onboard side, on the avionics, on the aircraft, and we've had a lot of discussion about, you know, the ground infrastructure and personnel and all that culture, which is really great. And has made me think that, you know, how can we maybe connect those two and get that data on board using the on-ground systems and get that necessary information in front of the pilots. And Max, we're willing to collaborate with you on the RAS system and Smart Runway, Smart Landing. But our recommendation, again, I think in all that I've heard today, would be around ADSBN and getting that more available on the aircraft. It's available out there. It travels with the aircraft. It would be available at all airports as aircraft go to any airport. And so that would be our recommendation. Thank you.
Scott Proudfoot with Runway Safety with the FAA. I'm going to throw out a number here. In FY22, we had over 52 million operations in the NAS. In that year also, we had 1,732 runway incursions. Of those, 16 were category A's and B's, your most severe. That means we had 1,716 opportunities with C and D operations, category runway incursions, to learn, to understand what broke down. And we do a lot of data gathering in the FAA. Our Surface Safety Group and our Runway Safety Council meet quarterly to go over this information, to come up with procedures, recommendations to other users. We have industry, we have FAA, we have other opportunities to partner with people to get the information out there, and I think that's where we need to work. We have data sharing and human factors issues. Going through the category A and B events from this year, FY23, 10 of them occurred due to not following a procedure or an instruction that was given by a controller. Why did those fail? Why did an aircraft depart when they were told to line up and wait? Why did an aircraft see runway status lights in front of them and depart and cause a category B runway incursion? That's the information we're missing. And to understand that, we may be able to identify training needs or opportunities for outreach, and I think we're missing that right now. So I would like to see better opportunities of data sharing, learning from human factors issues, and just being able to assist where we can.
I think for me, Bryce Banning, NTSB. I think for me, my one wish would be that we all leave today's meeting taking away at least one item that we can change, whether it's safety, whether it's better collaborations among our agencies, groups, and industry, whether it's data sharing, whether it's adding a piece of equipment. But we all leave grabbing a hold of at least one thing where we can make an effective change to our operations today. So that's my takeaway.
Okay, thanks everybody for being here, for all of you that we invited. This has been great. And the one thing I really hope that we can take away, as Bryce is saying, is how much we've learned from each other today. And every time we have one of these, it's like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. It's like, oh, I don't know, we're going to go back to work going, wow, you remember? We're geeks about that stuff. So, and it's great to talk to people that have the same interest. So I'm hoping that we can all take away that and invest in our people. We break this down. It's all about the people. Air traffic controllers love their facilities. Anybody that has a chance to go tour a facility, you see love there. They know it. They love their job. And like Bridget said, they are the brightest people. And it's the same thing with pilots. Controllers would love to get back up there in a flight deck. They would love to do that. And we need to, and as far as airports, they need to visit towers. They need to be able to go in the flight decks. They need to learn this in. This is investment in training and safety. They'll appreciate the jobs and appreciate the safety if they're led to it and said, wow, and to feel that ownership, it's ownership. They buy in. By God, I'm going to be the safest person in the world. That's what they're going to come out with. And that's just my view on things on that. But I won't get into all the technical stuff that we need, but but that's my wish for this takeaway. And I hope that we can somehow come up with more of these programs and find a way that we can get the people involved and to buy in, because that's what we need, buy into safety. Thank you.
That's a hard act to follow, Betty.
No.
Safety works when we all work together. You mentioned from the flight deck training. Flight deck training for controllers is sometimes cumbersome to get approved. It also relies on what? Staffing. At the end of FY 2022, we have currently 1,200 less certified professional controllers than we did a decade ago. The more eyes that you have out a window, the better off we are, whether it's on the flight deck or whether it's in the control environment within the tower cab. Because again, safety works when we work together, right? So that comes back to the flight deck training in particular, that I think doesn't really cost much, but us actively listening to one another and communicating and being able to see what that direct impact is of an operational, like a control instruction, to see what happens on both sides of the mic is important. Air traffic control is a mastery, right? It takes years to master your position. You learn that through repetition and that mechanicalism that I talked about earlier with the moving of the flight strips, the marking on the pad, check mark when somebody's cleared to land. We learn that over time. And you see that throughout the different runway incursions that we've had and some of those close calls that we've been able to prevent. Another availability to us is technology. So the expansion of surface surveillance to more facilities. However, that's only attainable through what? Stable and sufficient FAA funding. But there's only 43 airports out there with over 500 towered airports that actually have really a display in front of a controller. Those other towered airports, I mentioned this before, but they're using binoculars, right? I'm actually working a couple cases where we've had some hangars put up, guess where? In between the viewpoint of the controller and the runway or a taxiway. So I can't use my binoculars to see on the other side of that. Scott was mentioning a little bit of the data from FY 2022, and he mentioned the 16 A and B runway incursions that took place. I highlighted this earlier, and I'll highlight it again. 4 of those A and B incursions occurred at airports that had surface surveillance, and 12 of them did not have surface surveillance. So my recommendation would be to get more situational awareness to the controllers through surface surveillance. Open up those bridge to allow for us to get back on the flight deck. Make it easier. With that, we need bodies to do so.
Sorry. Pat Fitzgerald from Saab. I'll keep this quick. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's been a fantastic day. A lot of new people for me, so I've appreciated all the perspectives and conversation. For 2 recommendations, I just will keep it simple. Number 1, please do this again. Keep this conversation going. I think one thing that has been very clear to me today is that getting all the stakeholders together and discussing runway safety, we need as a community to have a safe environment where all the stakeholders will put their real concerns, their real priorities, their real constraints on the table. And then we can talk about it. The solutions are going to involve multiple things: training, technology, people, staffing, money. But we can't really do that in our individual stovepipes. We have to come together as a community and do that. So please keep this going. I think it's great. That's my first recommendation. The second one gets onto a point I think that was just made by Bridget. We've mentioned a few times today the event in Austin. And there was a catastrophe that was averted by heroic actions of some pilots. That's fantastic. It didn't need to be that close. It did not need to be that close of a call. We have the technology, we have the contracts, we have the systems, we have the technology in place. We could deploy more systems to give those heroic people, pilots, controllers, whichever stakeholder it is, more time. Make that less of a close call. And I think we have the tools on the table. So in the near term, I think we should use the solutions we have, the things we know that work, and deploy more of them. But then through this long conversation, we need a roadmap. Where are we going? Because just doing more of what we've done is good, but it's not good enough. So 10 years from now, if we're still doing that, we've sort of failed as a community. So those are my 2. Thank you.
Hi, Dave McCann with Serco. Thank you also for the invitation to be here. I think this has been very good. I hate to kind of pile on, but I think familiarization between all the different parts of this industry is very, very important. And we've moved away from that. I think it's very important for controllers, pilots, vehicle operators, airport operators to understand each other's roles in the system holistically. And I think that leads to better decision-making. And so I would argue that there is a way to make that happen. And it may be difficult now with staffing or those types of things, but there are ways of doing it locally without taking long flights with the air carriers. There are other ways of making that happen, and we need to look for those. And then I would just encourage the agency to streamline the equipment certification process. I know, we all look back, TCAS is kind of normal, and it has prevented literally thousands upon thousands of collisions. If we're looking for the next TCAS that'll prevent runway incursions, it'll be out there. We'll find it. There are plenty of very smart people out there that will bring that technology to bear, but we need to streamline the certification process so that it gets into the hands of the people that need it as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Downs from NASA ARS. I just have 2 quick suggestions. One would be to, and this is probably for academia and training and SMS types of environments, to help them establish an awareness of a distraction could be a very high-risk potential. Whether it be a coyote running across a runway or a pilot has to pre-program his FMS, these distractions are critical. They're very high risk, and they're kind of the theme throughout our reports are they're distractions that are very, very important to understand or recognize. The other one would be to recognize, I think as Jason said and Dr. McCauley regarding reactive fixes, that there's some unintended consequences to these reactive fixes. And in particular, we have a number of reports where pilots have expressed challenges in configuring their airplane to avoid the miss that was created or predicted by ASIX or whatever. But they had problems configuring their aircraft and caused overspeeds, altitude busts, heading changes, and a lot of confusion in the cockpit. So I think that's something to be aware of as they develop these remedies. Thank you.
Warren Abrams, NTSB. From a flight operations standpoint of preventing runway incursions, just some simplistic things that I would encourage the operators to emphasize And no-cost items, make sure you have your headset on. You know, the chairs ask us to bring our mics closer because she wants to hear what we're saying. Well, we need to hear as pilots what the air traffic controllers are saying to us as well. So a lot of cockpits take their headsets off at 10,000 feet after takeoff, or they put them on at 10,000 feet before landing, variations at the 10,000 foot level. But, you know, emphasize those items that, you know, we got to hear what is being said. That gets back to repeating the ATC clearance. You're clear to land, hold short, don't cross, stop. You know, the captain has got the tiller in his hand, he's got the brake pedals, he's got the throttles. You know, make sure he knows, or have him verbalize what the ATC clearance is. It's, like I say, it can be just as simple as clear to land or go around. But the pilot in command or the pilot flying needs to verbalize those instructions. And like I say, that's just a no-cost item. But communication is the key. So let's we're communicating here today. Let's make sure that communication gets into that cockpit. Let's have that captain and co-pilot communicating with one another. Thank you.
John Collins with the AOPA Air Safety Institute. I would totally agree that a couple of pilots on the flight deck looking outside, well-trained, are a great tool. I'll also say that in many general aviation operations, there's one pilot. And so my recommendation would be that we make sure that we have done everything we can to train that pilot to ensure they're making good decisions, that they're aware of what's going on around them, they have good situational awareness, they understand what controllers are asking them to do, and they are repeating that back to them correctly. So there is good confirmed communication between them. And that goes back to training, and I think that's where we need to focus a lot of the initial efforts on when we have pilots start their training. I will also echo that continued collaboration among all of us is important, and I appreciate being here and being able to talk about the GA side of things, give a little insight to that, but also I think I learned way more than I provided. So thank you all very much, and I appreciate that.
Wayne Pennell, BWI. Sustainable funding is always helpful for airports, for FAA, for anyone. The training we've talked about, I agree that we have to continue to increase the ground surveillance systems at airports. I get it, the money isn't there, but there's really no reason in this day and age that airports shouldn't have that technology. And then again, talking together, having these type of industry days where you can actually have open, free-flowing conversation, looking at it, as Jason had said a number of times, from the human factor part, from everyone's position. My position in this is much different than their position and your position. Yeah, I think I would leave it there. Communication, continue industry days, funding, I have to get that in there. And increase the awareness and airfield familiarization.
Justin Barkowski with the American Association of Airport Executives. Thank you, Jennifer, and the entire NTSB for putting this together. Really great event. I agree. This is really great conversations. The first thing I would say in terms of recommendations, and it's been said many times, but training, and I would add another phrase with that. It's coupled with safety culture. I'm a little bit surprised we haven't talked a lot more about safety culture, because training goes hand in hand with the culture. Even if you have training, if you're not living it on a daily basis throughout every day, it's not going to mean much. So you need those hand in hand, and that's something that I know our airports are always trying to preach. One of the challenges we have, obviously, if you may not know this, but most of the people that have badges at airports are not actual airport employees. They're tenants. They're other people that are not affiliated with the airport or controlled by the airport. So we are all in this together, and we all need to have the safety culture. It's not just the airports, it's our tenants, it's everybody. The second thing I would say, and I think it relates to the technology discussion and the funding piece, I would be cautious about saying there's a one-size-fits solution to all of these problems. We have to look at the data, we have to look at how a lot of the investigations play out. We have to acknowledge that we have very limited resources, and we can all ask for more funding, and we'll get that in again. But we have to acknowledge that we do have limited resources. So we need to be nuanced and try and solve problems. And looking at the airport's perspective, every airport is different. I mean, some of our smaller airports don't have the resources for a lot of the technologies that we have been discussing here today. The staffing's different, culture's different. So I would just be cautious about saying there's a silver bullet, there's a one-size-fits-all. Every airport needs to have this technology. ADSB out squitters may work at many airports, it may not work at all. Runway status lights, you could go on and on. So I would just caution that there probably isn't a one-size-fits-all. We really need to look at the data, be nuanced, understand we have limited resources, and try to go from there. But thank you again for putting this together.
Steve Jangelis with the Airline Pilots Association. Two recommendations I would have is, number one, give us the tools to be successful. Surveillance and situational awareness tools, which we've talked about at many different points throughout this meeting today, is very important to us. I know Bridget and I, when we were talking, you said, give me surveillance at every airport, and I'm happy. I said, I'm right there with you. So that's one right there. The second thing is, we should emphasize the fact that there's a lot of good people working at the FAA to tackle this project, as well as at the NTSB. And I think their support is definitely needs to be encouraged. That comes along with funding, obviously. But the work that they're doing over the years that I've been involved at the Office of Airports, the Office of Runway Safety, we can't take that away from, from leadership inside the FAA. Let's support them, because this is a relevant topic. It's not going to go away. As we see our operations increase, we need to be ever more vigilant on this threat to aviation. Then again, we are at the safest position in aviation, commercial aviation, as well as general aviation numbers at this time. But we want to drive to zero. Can we get there? Sure. With good people like this around the room, absolutely.
Jason Ambrosi, ALPA President. On behalf of 74,000 pilots at 40 airlines in the U.S. and Canada, thank you for doing this. This is a good conversation. It needs to happen. Hopefully something comes out of it. A lot of these things we all talk about, let's do it, and then there's no after action. So whatever you need from us, let us know. I'm going to go back to it's a today problem right now. This is not some future problem. These are issues we're having now. We need to focus on today. Embrace new technology, but also implement current technology. There's a lot of new in the system, and we need to reduce these distractions. Get back to basics, reduce distractions at the airport. Pilots, again, need to be looking out the window, dealing with what they're dealing with on a day-in, day-out basis. One thing that can happen right away is the operational pressure for on time or early. We could destigmatize that right away. You'll hear the airlines, to their credit, say, look, slow down, set the brake. Every airline has a little different nuance on it, but really making sure that the pilots don't feel that pressure, or the controllers don't feel that pressure. There's airports where if a pilot says, hey, I need 2 minutes to do a runway change, they get sent to a penalty box, or they're suddenly they're berated, or not berated, but there's a negative stigma to that, because we're all mission oriented. We want to do there, we want to do it on time, we want to do it as fast. Immediately, with all the new in the system, destigmatize that. All right, if you need 2 minutes, you get 2 minutes with no pressure. Same thing with the controller. Whoa, where's that binoculars? I lost sight of them. Look at all these strips. That's horrible. You should have some better system than that. But look, okay, I need a minute. We're going to stop everything for a minute. Make sure that there is an encouragement of that. Let's just stop, take a breath, and not get ourselves into a situation because of all the new people, and we're trying to rush adding all these flights and integrate all these new people in the NAS. But again, back to basics. Thank you.
Casey Murray, Southwest Airlines Pilots Association. And yes, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for attending. The discussion is great. The ideas are exceptional. And Ed, Steve, Jason, said the very important points for me. What I want to say is not one step back. I don't want to see us get complacent on our record for the past 12 years or so. We have to continue to move forward. We have to embrace technology. We have to embrace data. The data and analytics that we have to us, are available to us, has to be used so that we don't take a step back. Captain Downs mentioned reactive solutions, and And that's some of my concern that I see going on at the governmental level or even congressional level is, taking a step back from experience, rest, the fatigue, and some of the issues that are facing and having reactive solutions to correct problems that really need to be addressed by operators and by us all as one. So thank you for having me, and I have to apologize, I'm running late and I have to leave, but thank everyone for being here, we do appreciate it.
I'm used to it. First and foremost, obviously, thank you for inviting aircraft mechanics to this really important safety forum. We play in that sandbox a lot, and it's nice to actually be part of the conversation about what's being experienced on the runways, on the taxiways on a daily basis that we experience in a lot of our airports. By the way, my colleagues on the right there, I definitely was not taking anything away from the efforts that you and your airports or your organizations are doing. I actually applaud them. My goal and my commentary was more along the lines of trying to get all of your best practices plus any others we can find and get them throughout the system. So next is, for me, technology is not something that the members I represent are concerned too much about. Yes, we have some Luddites, myself included, but the obvious basic technologies are the ones we need the most. Someone said it previously, I apologize, I don't remember, give us the tools to be successful. Most of those tools are not high-tech, expensive, in the future things. These are things that we need today. And training, which I don't think anyone missed, is at the highest point of that. As to the two things that, for my membership that I represent, number one would be a focus on putting licensed airmen moving aircraft on the airfield. I'm not talking about pushing airplanes off a gate, but anytime an aircraft gets moved throughout the airfield, whether it's a pilot taxiing, a mechanic taxiing, towing, a high-speed tow, have that be licensed so that you can control the group of people that are being trained. It's totally about safety. It's totally about making sure that the end result is the airplane got to the gate and we don't have to call the NTSB for an event. The other one is, absolutely, I've beaten it up and I'm gonna continue to beat it up until I retire, and that is training. Ed said it, and so did just about everyone else here. Please, we have to get back to where we were well before the pandemic, of getting our training not just to check a box, but to actually help us in the toolbox. Thank you again.
Carlos Aguirre with PASS. Thank you for inviting us, labor. It's just heartening to see not just industry, not just government and academia, but labor here as well. I think the big takeaway for us, the two key points would be, as far as the systems, they work, that the ASD, ASDX, ASSC, they're proven systems. They've just served the aviation community the way they were supposed to be designed. And we can take, as we move forward in developing new systems, it's important that we have multilateration as a non-cooperative part of the technology as we move forward in any new systems. Now, as far as at locations that do not have the technology, and it's much easier to just go with cooperative systems, by all means, that would be increasing the safety factor where there's none right now. You don't have that technology. It should be the low-hanging fruit that's on the table. But with expanding and growing, having these new systems fielded, the workforce needs to be staffed. It has to be staffed adequately. We are down 15% on the technical side and ATO Tech Ops since 2016. And if we're going to be increasing the operations, increasing the equipment at facilities, we're going to need to be staffed properly, and we're going to need to be trained properly. So the second portion would be training and recurrent training. So where we're not only driving on the airfield and having some form of simulation, some form of virtual training where you can make mistakes in a virtual training environment, and you can practice over and over again. You're not in that, operation where one mistake is going to be costly. So that sort of training and recurrent training in the equipment, making sure that you're able to troubleshoot and go over scenarios and have different types of simulated training there as well. So those would be the two key areas that we would be concerned with.
Good afternoon, everyone. And yes, it is afternoon. First, I want to say thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the invitation. I love aviation. I'm passionate about safety. So you can tell how much this means to me. So I want to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to participate with each and every one of you. This has been fantastic. I didn't introduce myself. Mike McCormick, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And I have one recommendation.
Doctor.
I should have known that was coming. I have one recommendation and one fervent wish. My recommendation is focus on the fundamentals. I fear that we have drifted away from good communication, good coordination, and good procedures, and that contributes to risk. My fervent wish, I wish that academia had de-identified access to aviation safety information, analysis, and sharing data. There are tens of thousands of brilliant minds that are untapped that would be able to be put to work to provide analysis on that data and in turn provide predictions and trending analysis that would help us get ahead of where safety risk is growing in our system. So thank you.
Steve Sergi from MITRE. Again, I'll echo everyone else's appreciation for having this forum today and being able to participate in it. We talked very briefly, it's been said, about a positive safety culture. And I think a large part of that is the trust that was discussed. But obviously, when you have that trust, the ability to share and integrate your data in order to achieve that kind of holistic learning culture. Is it still not? And it's that learning culture is not just useful when you're looking at the events, the encounters, the 16 A's and B's, but also the ones that didn't get to that point, and learning from the barriers that remained in place and their efficacy and their strength becomes very vital. And when you talk about, I think, being able to be predictive and getting to that point where we're applying AI and ML to this wealth of data we would then have, that only opens the aperture even more for what insights we can extract from the data. And right now, even there's data beyond what we have available to us in a digital format that we're limited. If we talk about like LOAs and SOPs, there's understanding that you as the operators, you as the controllers have about what's intending to occur, that you can't apply AI ML to it because it doesn't exist in a format where that's a parameter that it can learn from. So just to continue to hit upon that, to paraphrase a cliche, learning is power, right? And what we learn can inform what we train, depending, for all stakeholders. And not just what we train, but how we train it. So to Mr. Tidwell's point about being able to have impact in our training, one thing I think we could all pretty much agree to or note is that generations learn differently. And so we can't be training these next generations, the next 1,800 plus controllers, necessarily the same way that we trained the last generation. And so there's some opportunities, I think, there to continue to explore. But that learning also informs our decisions on mitigation strategies and the investment decisions that we choose to make holistically as well and individually with what available resources we have available to us. And so, and from a more real-time aspect, I'll just say that that learning can also inform the memory aids that Bridget talked about. but as well as some of the cognitive assistant type research that we've explored with the FAA and others in the flight deck. So thank you again.
Hello, Emily Gibson, NTSB. And to kind of echo what Betty had said, and Patrick too, I think alluded to it, but I really do love the joint communication, coordination, collaboration of things like this. This is how we move that safety needle, right? And I think I definitely learned a lot. Learning is power, like you said. And I really do like that we can come together for things like this.
We miss Sean, so you thought you were off the hook, but go ahead.
So close. Sean, excuse me, Sean Williams with the NTSB, and as has been said previously, thank everyone for coming. And there's two things. One, if we want to look at something right now that's actually free, review the procedures. Are they adequate? When you're coming onto a runway or clearing a runway, something as simple as clear right, finals clear, clear left, runways clear, clear left, cleared across, clear right, cleared across. Take a look at them. Are they still applicable? Were they written 20 years ago when the manual was put in? And the other thing, we've talked about the trust and for the data in order to get that kind of data, but there also has to be an honest, you have to be honest with yourself. The pilots do, the mechanics do, anyone driving a truck. Do I feel comfortable doing this? Do I feel adequately trained for it? And if not, that's where that trust comes in, that they can speak up without the fear of reprisal. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you, all of you, for coming, for participating. I appreciate everyone sticking around for 5 hours. It's about an hour longer than we anticipated, but that's okay. I really do appreciate this discussion. I learned a lot today. First and foremost, let me thank the NTSB, my colleagues within the NTSB. You did a tremendous job pulling this together. I think everyone stared at me when I said, hey, let's have this, and you already have a lot to do, but I think this was really worth it, and I really appreciate everything that you all do on a daily basis, and thank you for pulling this together and for your work to improve safety. But I also just want to highlight, I don't like having discussions just to have discussions. I don't do that. I don't like walking away thinking, okay, we had this great discussion for 5 hours, bye. Nope. I'm sorry to tell my NTSB colleagues that I already have half a dozen things written down that I would like to do coming out of this. Whether it's, I'm going to send some things over to DOT and Congress, but we're also going to continue to meet and maybe drill down a little bit more on training and some things that we could work together on. I think there are a lot of opportunities there, and stay tuned for next steps. This is not it, and just really appreciate our work together. I do thank you all for our partnership. We are partners in safety. Again, I'll just repeat, sometimes we have different views on what that is, but we all support each other, and I think that's really where the trust comes in. With that, I'm sorry to say I only have pizza for the NTSB and FAA upstairs, don't forget. But next time, hopefully we'll have coffee, donuts, and pizza next time. And air conditioning, that's true. I know. Thank you very much, appreciate it.